My name is Michael St. Ange, and this semester for my CSE 335 project, I created an app called LocalStocks. When deciding which app I was going to do, I was really into the stock market and the computer science surrounding it because it's very in-depth, and I kind of just want to get my hands wet with the stock market. And so I was looking at different websites of the stock market, and I noticed a trend. I noticed a lot of times stock market websites and applications, they focus on the very big picture. They focus on which companies, on the biggest companies. They focus on Fortune 500 companies. They don't necessarily focus on local companies. And so I wanted to give my stock, allow people to look at local companies and figuring out whether the stocks of the companies that they're buying and selling from, if those companies are doing well, and if maybe they would be interested in investing in local companies. So for example, if every day I go shop at Costco, I might be interested in saying, maybe I want to invest in Costco. And so my application gives an easy way to look up those stock prices, and it's tailored towards helping people invest locally and support their local companies. My application also creates a very easy way to track the stocks you're interested in. What it does is it stores for your user account, it stores all the stocks you're interested in, which allows you to check how the prices are doing and to figure out which stocks you might be interested in purchasing later down the line. And so by keeping a list of them, it makes it a lot easier to remember which stocks you want to follow without having to buy the stocks. Because a lot of times, it's the only way to really follow a stock diligently is to buy it, unless you want to set up a lot of other work. And so it's by just holding all the stocks in one place, it makes it very easy for the user. Lastly, a big thing is that I wanted to create an application that didn't really require working with brokers, because even though it means I can't buy stocks, by allowing the user to not work with brokers, I save them a lot of hassle, because with brokers you have a lot of paperwork, you have a lot of other things that you need to integrate into setting up. And so by eliminating that out of the equation, it makes it a lot easier experience for the user, and it makes them a lot easier to get learning about the stock market and figure out how the stock market works without having to dive in right away. As you can see from my diagram, it got very complicated very fast. So in order to make sure I stay on the time limit, I will try to get through as fast as possible. There are a few parts missing, such as arrows right here, and that's simply because the software I was working with couldn't handle that many objects on the screen. And so arrows are used to represent composite class relationships. Open arrows represent superclass relationships, so all the view controllers are a subclass of the view controller, and the filled in arrows are used to represent model relationships or composition relationships or hazard relationships. And so those are often associated with the models. And so I'll try to get through this as fast as possible. So first we have the stock entity. Stock entity has an identifier, a name, a price, and a ticker. The identifier is actually the username of the user. And so the reason I have an identifier is because if you have two people who each have a stock and then one of them deletes it, I don't want that stock to be erased from both users. So each stock has an identifier, so it's only associated with one account. The stock model is used to store all the stocks for all the users, and it basically allows the editing of stocks, the adding of stocks, and deleting of stocks to make sure, just to keep everything clean and to store all the data. And so most classes that integrate stock data will have the stock model in it. The user entity is used to store users. Now, I don't have users across devices, but multiple users can use the same device, which makes it very simple to share the application with someone else using the same device. I also have a user model, which is used to maintain all the users and to be able to allow each view controller to make sure that they're using the right user's information. When you start on the application, you'll start right here at the main view controller. That basically just allows you to see the about page, to create an account, and to log in. From there, you can go to create account, and so the create account, this application requires an API key. So I take you to another view controller right here, the alpha view controller, and it uses WK WebView to create an account on the alphavantage.co website. and to get your own API key. Once you're created, you're set. Everything will work. The next time you log in, your information will be stored, so you could just use the login and don't need to create another account. From there, we go right here to the profile view controller. This is like the center page. This is where everything starts and everything branches out from. So there are a lot of UI buttons, as you can see right here. These are all segues to other view controllers, and so it allows you to access everything from one simple page. You don't have to go to get to any view controller. It's a very short path. Next, we'll start with the mapping view controller, which is right here. The mapping view controller has a few data which allows it to search for stocks in an area. It's originally set at a certain area, which is in Phoenix, but the user can easily change the area to wherever they want, say Dallas, Chandler, Tempe, wherever they want. And so from there, they can perform searches on the data, and from that data, they can then navigate to our search view controller, which is right here. The search view controller does a variety of functions. First, when you call the search, it calls the AlphaVantage API and it searches for any stocks, either tickers or names that represent the search you put in. And so if we're looking from map, we can use the search to look for a stock. Look for, let's say, Wells Fargo, as I show later. And so then Wells Fargo will come up. From there, let's say I want to view more about the stock and maybe add it to my watch list. I can call another function which will then transfer me over to here, which is the stock view controller. I have to call another API key so I get more information about that specific stock. So I'll want the stock's price before I know whether I'm interested in it, because I don't want to be dealing with penny stocks. So right here in the stock view controller, I can look at the stock and possibly add it to my watch list if I like what I see. So from there, we could go to the watch list view controller, which is in the top left. The watch list view controller integrates a stock table cell, and to get there from the profile view controller, you'll use the navigate, which is right here. But if you go directly to it, oftentimes you don't need it. So we have the watch list view controller. This integrates a table view, so you can view all the stocks you're interested in. And so that's really cool because it creates it all in a simple view. It shows you all the prices and it allows you to easily keep track of what you're interested in. And so from there, we can, let's say we want to click on our Wells Fargo app, we go to a second stock view controller. This one's slightly different because we don't want to add it to our table. It's simply not needed. It's already there if we're accessing that. But this one allows us to remove it from our view control, our watch list, because maybe we don't like it anymore. So it has functionality for that. Another thing that's within the stock is a search list model. What's that? This right here is the navigate view controller. My mistake. The search list model is used to hold search data. So when I search, and let's say I return 5 items back, the search list model holds the names and tickers of each of those stocks, which allows me to easily figure out. Let's say I search AAP, and I really want Apple. Well, the stock for AAP is going to come up first. Then I could navigate through the list of the search list model and figure out, oh, there's Apple, and then I could go navigate to the stock view from there. Last point to touch on is the camera view controller. The camera view controller, the idea behind the camera view controller is somewhat similar to the mapping view controller. Let's say you take a picture of a company you like or a company that did an event for you. And so you can go through your photo album, find what company helped you, what company supported you, and then from there you can perform the same functionality as you performed from the mapping view controller. You can go directly to the search and you could search for the stock you're interested in. And it's very simple, and it pulls up the image from your photo library so you can see where the stock is. And so that is a quick summary of the view controller's model. And so it goes more in depth, but that's all the time I have. And so now we're going to go to the model view controller, or the MVC architecture. Here we have the model view controller architecture, and we'll start with the controller because that's the center of everything. So the controller handles logging on to the user, which involves going to the user model and figuring out the data there. It also handles the stock data, which includes calling the API and figuring out the names and the prices of the stock. The user update involves updating the user of the information concerning the stock, such as searches or the change in the stock price. The view basically contains elements for the user to interact with, such as UI buttons. It allows them to watch the stocks they're interested in, allows them to view stock prices, allows them to interact with the map and find what they want. And so the user action can then update back to the controller and tell the controller what they want to add by adding, deleting table cells, and they can use a search bar, which controller can then use to decide what stocks to search. Next, with our model data, when we update the API calls, the controller will then update the model with the new data. In this case, it will change the stock entity by adding the stocks data and the price name to the core data. Additionally, we have the user entity, which the controller also updates, and that is added to core data. And so whenever new user is added, core data is changed. The core data will also notify the controller if a stock price change, and it will also be removed from the watch list as well. By keeping the MVC separate, it allows me to easily figure out where problems are occurring, and allows me to also store the data, which I found very helpful in a lot of cases, separating out the model as much as possible to allow me to store data and to also view data in different view controllers without having too complicated segues. So here I highlight some of the main capabilities of my application. One of the big things I like to do, because it's called LocalStocks, is to search areas to find companies. And so by searching for areas to find companies, I can see what's near me and what I might be interested in that's near me. And so from there, using right here, we can then navigate to the search, and we can look up more information about those companies and see if their stock exists and how much it's worth. And so another thing that my application allows you to do is follow the price. So you can continually update the price, and you're able to figure out if a stock you're following, such as Apple, whether Apple is going up or down, and whether they're gaining or losing money. And so that is all wrapped into making those API calls to find and update the price in stocks. It also allows, interesting thing is, it allows multiple users to use the same device, so that if you want to share it without intersecting data, it allows you both to use the exact same information and to keep track of whatever stocks you're interested in by yourself. Another integrated feature is the camera feature, which allows you to look at old pictures and figure out what companies may have supported you in the past, and also search for those. So a big thing with mine is just viewing stocks and being able to keep track of how the stocks are doing. So there were definitely a few limitations on my project. There were a few things I would have liked to add maybe in the future as I work further on the project, and there were a few things that the application was intentionally designed to be limited by. So the users cannot purchase stocks, which means this app is only for tracking stocks, and that's kind of what the app was looking for, because there's a big hassle when you go through brokers to purchase stocks. And so, however, even though it doesn't allow purchasing stocks, and so that means that the user isn't actually always as involved with the data. And so, because I can't be a broker, I can't have it purchase stocks, because there's a lot of legal information surrounding that. Additionally, user data is combined to a device, which makes it safer cybersecurity-wise, but it's also less mobile. So I was considering using Firebase to control the data. However, I feel like it's a better way for the user just to be able to control the data on one device and be able to look it up on one device. So it can also allow more different lists on different devices, which makes it more easier. Or in the future, I could allow there to be multiple different lists on the same device, just more features that could be possible in the future. Also, it currently does not have technical indicators. Technical indicators are used to indicate how well a stock is doing using different metrics, and so to integrate those would require a large plethora of multiple view controllers, and although it's not feasible right now, it might be something I want to do in the future if I continue to pursue this app, because I believe technical indicators are another way to see if the companies that you're looking at, and especially local companies, if they're doing well or if maybe they're not doing so hot. So there were quite a few lessons I learned when developing this project. For one of mine, I had to integrate the Alpha Vantage into my application. And so that was really important because I want the user to know exactly where to go when they need to get the API key. And so by directing them exactly where they need to go, it takes away a lot of that struggle. And so I found that I understood the importance of it, and I found a way to make it very simple so you could easily get the information. I also learned how to manage a large amount of segues. As you saw from my earlier class diagram, it got fairly complex, and so by learning proper naming techniques and by learning, I ended up using a lot of show details, and by making sure I kept my segues clean, I was able to properly organize my data without creating a mess between having to have like a stack of unwinds. And so by just keeping it organized, that was a good lesson I learned. I also learned how to make it more easier to create API calls given random user input, and so that was basically just parsing input and making sure that the user didn't enter improper input, and to make sure that my API calls work properly. Another thing I learned is the importance of maintaining code after it's been released. For some of my API functions began to not work at a certain point, and so I had to go back and update those. And additionally, the way some of my API call functions work, they originally worked when I was first running it, right? And then as I go back and look at it, there is some errors with the timing of it. And so it's important. I learned it's definitely a very important thing. You need to go back, you need to maintain the code, you need to continue to test the code, and you need to always just keep making updates because there's always something better you can do. And so I learned that a lot. Another interesting thing, a little tidbit I learned was how to use a semaphore, especially through Xcode. And so what I did, I used a semaphore to make some of my API calls synchronous, and so that this is a part that ended up getting slightly buggy near the end, but it made sure that when I called something, it didn't start performing segues until it got the information. So the semaphore made sure that I got the information, and then it transferred it somewhere else. So there were quite a few lessons I learned and quite expanded my knowledge a lot doing this project and handling so much data. Improving the project, I think making either the camera or the map required would be better, simply because if you want to create a useful application, once there was too many things involved, it started getting just a real big hassle. And so I felt like having one or the other would sufficiently show that we gained a mastery of the concepts. And so for mine, map really worked because that was the theme of mine, but the camera wasn't as necessary, and it was sort of a stretch to include thematically within my application. I also think emphasizing the importance of API calls, not necessarily in class, but within the project would have been better, because I think API is definitely an important thing within applications that you want to do to get information from somewhere else. So I think that is an important thing that might want to be emphasized more in future projects. Additionally, I thought segues, I think, are very important, especially with earlier projects. Segues necessarily weren't as big, simply because we only had one or two applications. Those weren't the core focuses. However, when you're dealing with a big application, you might need different types of segues, and so I feel like going over in class the different types of segues for a big application would be very useful, so we know exactly what we're going for. Lastly, I think there should be a practice run on either maybe creating your own project, not the big one, but a small one, and then also a practice run maybe on maintaining a large set of view controllers in order to hold a large application. Because when you're only dealing with 1, 2, 3 view controllers, you're not able to understand how you maintain information and pass information along, simply because there's not that many. And so by creating a lot more view controllers, maybe with less data, it's able to create a better sense of how to handle all of that. Thank you very much for such a great year, and I hope you enjoy LocalStocks.